Hey friends, welcome back. Today I'm sharing with you 2 delicious recipes that are super cheap to make. And the primary ingredients are ones that you probably already have in your pantry, like rice and beans. I also have some bonus footage at the end of this video of something delicious I made this week. My first meal is a one-pot dish that is made with rice. Today I'm making risotto. Typically this is made with arborio rice, which is a short grain rice with a high starch content. And I'm going to be using this Jasmine long grain rice because that's what I have on hand. But if you have a short grain rice, go ahead and use that. I'm going to be using mushrooms to make a mushroom risotto. I picked this up, I think this was about $4 at Sam's Club, but I was thinking there are, I think, still some grocery stores where you can get the mushrooms individually. So if so, you could just pick up like 3 of these and that would make for an inexpensive meal. Of course, if you don't like mushrooms, you can sub in lots of different things like asparagus, chicken, peas, beets. But of course, I would focus on what you already have in your house. I'll be using 3 cloves of garlic from this. And then you need a bouillon. I'm using this Better Than Bouillon vegetable seasoning, and I have 3 garlic cloves that I'm going to chop up. Obviously, you can use some garlic powder, but garlic is cheap where I live, so if it's also cheap where you live, I do recommend trying to use the fresh garlic. You could also add a shallot to this, or even use a regular onion or some leeks. I think that those would be good in this as well, and very inexpensive. You could literally make this risotto with just rice and one other ingredient, so like rice and onions. And I'm thinking rice with the green onions would be great because you could get the beautiful green ends and then you would also get the white ends. I think that would make a really nice risotto. I'm making dinner just for myself, so I'm only using 3/4 of a cup of rice. But obviously you do want to adjust this for how many people you're cooking for. And I always wash my rice. So I just keep rinsing it until the water runs clear, usually about 5 to 6 times. And for risotto, we do need to have a separate pan with the broth because we need to have that broth heated because we want to add the heated ladles of the liquid to the rice while it's cooking. If we added cold liquid, it would interfere with the cooking process. So I'm adding as much as I want of this bouillon and then I'm going to taste it. But first I need to dissolve it into this. If you've got powder, just add as much as you want. I'm sure you could use chicken bouillon or beef bouillon, basically whatever it is that you like the best. And it might also be fun to experiment with different varieties, like the chicken tomato bouillon might make an interesting risotto. I love the way fried mushrooms taste. By frying them, they just get a better texture than just adding them directly into the dish. And I think that this is about ready. I'm going to go ahead and give it a taste. Yeah, I think that that is perfect. And then I add in my garlic last because I just didn't want this to burn. I'm just going to cook the rawness off of this briefly before I add in my rice. I am not going to toast my rice. I was actually consulting one of my cookbooks from Chef Kenji Lopez, and he did an experiment where he toasted and he didn't toast. And he showed a picture of each, and the one that he didn't toast turned out creamier. So I thought I would follow his direction here and just keep it simple. A lot of directions on risotto say to never stop stirring, but actually both of my favorite cookbooks said that it's not exactly necessary. I've ordered a lot of risotto in fancy restaurants, and I am very picky about risotto, which is why I think I was kind of putting off making this. I guess a little bit afraid I wouldn't be able to live up to my standards, so to speak. But I can tell you that the most important part of the risotto for me is that it be creamy. Lots of times I've ordered it and you receive it and it's all dry and chunky. I remember telling you guys about a restaurant called Ago in West Hollywood that was super nice Italian restaurant I used to go to, and they made the best truffle risotto I've ever had in my life. And I would make a special trip to that city even though I lived a couple of hours away just to be able to dine at that restaurant. The food was amazing. Anyway, as you saw, I covered this and cooked it for 10 minutes. I'm going to check the status of the rice, and this is almost done. I'm going to go ahead and bring this up to the consistency that I want, and then it's going to be done. I think one of the tricks to this dish is going to be cooking it properly, especially if you're using the long grain rice, because like when we're cooking congee, the rice actually kind of disintegrates into the dish. Remember, that's that Chinese version that I made. It's also popular in some other areas. But anyway, for this dish, we want it to become creamy, but not completely disintegrate. We want some texture to the rice. When I tasted this, I feel the texture still, but it's nice and creamy. So I think we're just about where we need to be. Obviously, if you want to add in some grated Parmesan cheese or anything like that, you would do that at the end. So right before you plate it, you would add this in. That is actually going to even make this creamier and hold this together even more. So you might even need more liquid if you add in the Parmesan cheese at the end. And I keep spilling a little bit, but that's because I'm using my left hand to ladle that liquid in there. But I think probably a good rule on this is to have it a little looser in the pan because it's always going to set up a little bit after you plate it. So keep that in mind. This is a fun recipe because there's so many different ways you can go with this. And let me tell you, this tastes amazing. There's something about the combination of those mushrooms with that particular bouillon. I definitely have to recommend that you try that combination. Probably because that vegetable seasoning broth has some mushroom broth in there. And I'm just adding black pepper and some dried parsley. You know, you could have added some thyme in here. Lots of different herbs that you could add in here. I know some people have made a tomato feta risotto, which sounds delicious to me. Also, another one would be like a butternut squash risotto. And also, some people have made risotto out of things like farro and even like a quinoa risotto, which I'm not even sure how the texture would be on that, but it might be interesting to try sometime. I decided to toast up a piece of this bread that I get from Trader Joe's. Just thought it would be a nice combination to have a toasted piece of bread with this. And I added the broth to the consistency that I want, and I'm going to go ahead and plate this because I think this is about right. My youngest son came in and he was like, "Oh my gosh, that smells amazing." And it really does smell good. Probably because we used the garlic, but also just the overall scent of this is divine. This is my hug to you this week because that is exactly what this meal is. This exceeded all of my expectations, and I have to go on record right now saying that this is my very favorite mushroom recipe. I feel like mushrooms were just made for risotto. This is one of those meals that if you make this for your family, even though you don't have much money for food, I can guarantee you your kids are going to grow up with fond memories of this dish. This is a restaurant quality meal, and you don't need to have cheese to make this delicious. I did try it with a small amount of parmesan just to see, and of course that even elevated it further. But honestly, this dish is a 10 without any cheese. And you can feel free to customize this by adding in some butter or an inexpensive protein source. This was actually a huge meal and I didn't plan to eat it all, but it was so good that I practically licked my plate. Okay, for my next meal, I'm making refried bean soup. And this normally uses a can of refried beans, which I love because it's a fast shortcut to a great meal. But I am currently out of refried beans, so I'm just going to make a quick pot of pintos. And I'm going to go ahead and add some salt, some garlic powder, and just a smaller amount of onion powder, just to give a nice flavor to these beans. These have amazing flavor, so I think these are going to work out great. But I am going to throw them into my blender and just blend these up to make some super quick refried beans. In my day-to-day eating, I do eat a lot of refried beans. Rosarita refried beans are my favorite, but since I do have a lot of pinto beans that I just don't seem to be going through, I should probably make a batch of refried beans every weekend. And plus I would save some money. I decided to go ahead and add a touch more of the bean sauce in here, or bean broth I should say. And then I'm going to add a little chili powder and some salt, because my favorite beans do have those in, and I'm just trying to recreate those. But obviously, again, if you have a can, it's going to make this recipe so easy. And I was just curious if I actually got a full can of the refried beans, which is about 16 ounces. And I do have a small amount left in the blender, so I probably have about 16 ounces. I started by adding about 1.3 cups of water, but actually it's probably better if you add the can of refried beans in and then add the water to your desired consistency. That way you're able to control the consistency better, because some of you are going to want your soup thicker than others. I myself tend to like a little bit thinner of a soup, but that's just me. And for some reason, when I was thinking about this recipe, I was a bit hesitant to make it. And I think it's because the image that my mind was conjuring up was completely different than what this ended up tasting like. But more on that later. And I'm going to be using some fire roasted tomato salsa that I pick up at Walmart. This is the ultimate shortcut to this recipe because this has tomatoes, tomato puree. It's got the peppers, the onions, the garlic in there. And I'm just using a small amount of each of these because I'm only making one serving. And you can use like a Mexi corn if you'd rather, but I have just regular corn. If I had a bag of frozen corn, that would be perfect. You could also kind of pan char your corn first. Trader Joe's sells a bag of the charred corn, which actually would be really great in this recipe. I usually do have a bag of that in my freezer. And then I'm going to be adding in a few canned black beans. These are drained and rinsed, and you just kind of put in to the desired amount, and I'll eyeball this later and see if I need to add any more. And then I'm going to add 1/4 teaspoon of cumin. Sometimes I like more cumin, sometimes less, but that really is an individual preference. And then you just need to add some bouillon of your choice. And for me, I'm using this vegetable bouillon. I used to have a powder, but I haven't been able to find that lately. But you can use chicken if you want. You can use the chicken tomato, and I am going to add a little oil because I realized there is fat in the beans that I normally eat. So I was trying to recreate that and I forgot to add the fat to my beans. And I'm going to give it a taste for flavor, and it does taste good. I'm going to go ahead and let this simmer. And I do think I'm going to need a little bit more of the bouillon. And this time I added just a small amount of the tomato chicken bouillon. And I did decide to cut up some tortillas to add to the top of the soup. This does remind me of a tortilla soup. So I think I would call this a refried bean tortilla soup. There are lots of different things that you could use to top this with. For this first bowl that I plated, I had my tortilla strips a little too long. That's because I'm a bit of a lazy cook anytime after about 4 o'clock. But you could also put jalapeno on here. You could put avocado, sour cream. Lots of different things would work on the top of the soup. And I love the way the salsa included enough of the tomato that I didn't feel like I was missing out on not having tomatoes. And this is my second bowl, and on this one I did a little bit better with the tortilla strips so that I could have the bite-sized pieces in each bite. Guys, I love this. I actually can't believe I didn't try this already. This is such an excellent version of tortilla soup because it has much higher protein and much higher fiber and more nutrition all around. I love this. This is so fast if you're using canned refried beans. It just makes sense. And most of this can be made with items you already have in your pantry. This is another 10 for me. I ate that entire pan of this in no time at all. Anyway, I do hope you'll give this one a try. And I do have some bonus footage for you. I made a meal for breakfast this weekend that was so delicious, and I thought some of you might want to try. I wanted a breakfast with some protein, and I was completely out of eggs or any other kind of protein, but I had these black bean patties in the freezer, and I had bought this Cabot pepper jack cheese, which is 0 lactose. And then I had a few tortillas left over, so I decided to make a quesadilla. And I knew I would need some acidity with this, and I had this 1 can of salsa left over, which is funny because you saw this being used in the first recipe. Part of this, actually. I'm cooking for myself, so this can will go a long ways. But then I thought, I don't want to open that new can just for the quesadilla, so I thought maybe I'll dice a tomato to go on top of it. So let's put this together. And the reason I'm showing you this is because you don't have to have these black bean patties. Obviously, you can make your own. I've made them at least a couple times on the channel, and they turned out great. They are very easy to make. They freeze well, and they're low cost. And I'm going to fry this up in a small amount of oil. You might be able to do it without the oil, but it's definitely going to taste better with the oil. So I'm just going to use a small amount and go from there. This Cabot brand has some different lactose-free cheeses. I was actually looking for Monterey Jack. I was going to make those spinach enchiladas again that you saw me make a couple weeks ago, where I ate mine without the cheese. And so I picked this up, but I've been enjoying these slices so much. I've been taking them in my lunch along with like some radishes and some sliced up turnip. A lot of times I take carrots, but I have been eating so many carrots in the last few weeks. I decided that I definitely needed to mix it up a bit, and I was able to get the turnip on a fairly good deal. I don't remember how much it was, but the radishes were 2 bunches for $1. And so I just got those and cut those up and have those ready to pull out for my lunches each day. And I actually like to eat these for my 10 o'clock snack. And there is something magical about the combination of radishes with cheese. Actually, radishes along with any kind of fat is good. If you guys remember, I did those radishes, and I think it was either cream cheese or butter English tea sandwiches. And those were so good. So it's along the same lines. I think I also made a little appetizer with cream cheese and the radishes. That's what it was. Anyway, back to my recipe. The first time I made this, I added 3 of these, but I actually only needed 2 on the second go around because it does melt and kind of spread out. And then I cooked the black bean patty in the air fryer, but you can also cook it in the pan, you can cook it in the oven, you can cook it in the toaster oven, doesn't really matter. And I did get a little crispy around the edges because I left it in a little too long because I was responding to some of your comments this morning because today is Sunday. And I think I'll go ahead and dice this Kumara tomato. And here's what it's looking like. It's going to be a little hard to turn it because I don't have cheese on the bottom side, but that's okay. So I've had these black bean patties in the freezer for a while now, and I just haven't been using them as regularly as I would like. Sometimes beans or bean patties can be a little bit rich, and so when I do make them, I like to make them in a meal where they're kind of balanced. So I was thinking of different ways that I could use these patties that I would really love them. And so that's why I tried this recipe. And this was Sunday morning and I was so hungry and I needed to run to the store, but I didn't want to go on an empty stomach. And this is exactly my kind of breakfast. I love savory meals like this for breakfast. It's just the best. I'm not a person that has always enjoyed breakfast kind of foods anyway. I mean, I'll eat them, but they're not my favorite. And I already had cilantro in. Cilantro was 3 for $1 at Wholesome Choice. So I know that some of you can't get that, but obviously you can use any kind of topping here. And this was delicious. It was so good. And then I was thinking that I might want to add a little bit of Crystal hot sauce, which is a Louisiana hot sauce for the acidity. And also I realized I had some sweet onions in there. So I went ahead and cut these up and added those to the top. And that was delicious also. This actually turned out way better than I thought it was going to turn out. This is actually now going to be a regular recipe for me. That's how much I loved it. Having those extra toppings on there just really help balance the richness of the black bean patty. And again, if I had more freezer space, I would be more likely to make up a ton of those black bean patties myself and just store those in the freezer. You know what this tasted like? It kind of tasted like a taco. Because all of the ingredients in those that are seasoned in the black bean patties just kind of reminded me of seasoned ground meat or the seasoned veggie crumbles that I use sometimes. Anyway, guys, I hope you will try this because it's delicious. You could also add sour cream. You could add guacamole. You know, there's lots of different toppings on there. Shout out to me in the comments if you are thinking of any other ways we could make this with different options. Oh, and by the way, I think cheddar would be the best cheese. I love the combination of cheddar with black beans, but I don't currently have any cheddar that I can eat. So anyway, hope you guys like this recipe and give it a try. And that concludes this week's video. Thanks so much, friends, and I hope you have a great week. I'll see you Sunday.
Morning has broken, my windows are open. Wanna feel the wind blow through my hair. Which way do I follow? What happens tomorrow? I turn to you and hope you can guide the way. Sometimes I give up, just wanna